we turn on the train lights and set off on the means of transportation that, whenever we can, we choose to travel around Spain. The unstoppable expansion of high-speed services in the country has meant a before and an after in the way we travel around the country. And over the course of more than 200 high-speed journeys, we have realized that there are a number of mistakes that those unfamiliar with the system repeat over and over again. Some mistakes carry no major consequences, but others can have a considerable financial impact on your travels. Hola, ¿qué tal? Hello! Welcome to the channel where we want you to be happier traveling through Spain and Portugal with the help of our videos and of our self-guided walking tours. What we have done today is to gather those mistakes in a single video and present them to you in the hope that you will manage to avoid them so that your high-speed traveling experience will be perfect. Without further distractions, let's get to the first mistake. The first mistake is to call everything AVE, A-V-E. This is not a major mistake and even has a certain logic. Until a few years ago, there was only one high-speed service in Spain, the AVE, provided by the public operator Renfe. Most Spaniards, when we went to travel at high speed, we did so on an AVE. We would buy a ticket for the AVE, we would tell the cab driver to take us to the AVE station, and the cities that did not yet have one would ask the government to build them an AVE line. This generic use of the term AVE as a synonym for high-speed train is commonplace to this day. But now there are 4 different services. The correct thing to do would be to speak of high-speed train when we are not referring to a specific service, or to mention its name if we are talking about specific service, especially to avoid confusion. Related to the previous point, it would be a mistake not to know about the existence of 4 different high-speed services in Spain. There is the AVE, the oldest service, which reaches more places, operated by the public company Renfe. There is the AVLO, a low-cost service also operated by Renfe. There is the Ouigo, another low-cost service belonging to the French state-owned company SENCEF. And finally, there is the IRIO, a service provided by a Spanish-Italian joint venture. We have already dedicated a video in the channel to each of these services. If you want to know more details, you will find the links in the first comment below the video. The third mistake, not knowing where you can get to by high-speed train. The high-speed train network in Spain has grown tremendously since the first train between Madrid and Barcelona was launched in 1992. Today, many tourist destinations in Spain can be reached by high-speed train, and the network is growing all the time. Periodically, we publish a video in which we tell you how far the high-speed network in Spain reaches. Be sure to check it out. But you should know that there are still parts of Spain that cannot be reached by high-speed train. Keep that in mind when you buy your tickets, so you don't think you are buying high-speed when you are getting a slower train. One of the biggest mistakes, and if you're a regular on the channel, you will have heard us talk about it countless times, is to leave the purchase of tickets for high-speed travel to the last minute. By buying at the last minute, you are going to pay more expensive and risk not finding tickets. And despite the endless warnings we have made, rare is the week when someone does not appear on the channel with a trip planned for the next few weeks and without having bought the train tickets yet. High-speed fares are dynamic. They work in a similar way to flight prices. When they go on sale, the system offers several tickets at deeply discounted prices, which are the first to be sold. As the days, weeks and months go by, the cheapest prices are sold out and only the most expensive prices that nobody wants are left. Buying at the last moment, you are going to pay a more expensive fare, But if you also buy the tickets at the station ticket offices, in the case of Renfe, they are going to charge you an extra fee. It is not a good deal. About availability, keep in mind there are more people traveling by high-speed train than ever. If you don't secure your seat, when you go to buy it, you may not find a seat for the train you are interested in, and you will be forced to wait several hours for the next service. This is an incredibly common mistake that ends up causing childish tantrums at boarding that end up being embarrassing. Airlines have baggage rules, high-speed train companies too. Each company has its own rules, and it is your responsibility to understand what you are buying. If we were to print out the list of people who buy tickets without reading the rules, we would have to deforest part of the Amazon from all the paper we would need. Exaggerations aside, the cheaper basic fare only includes the transport of large suitcases in the case of AVE. On Avlo and Wigo, if you want to travel with a large suitcase, you have to pay a separate charge to do so. And in the case of Irio, you have to buy a more expensive fare that allows you to carry a large suitcases. All fares for all services include the transport of one carry-on bag and one personal item such as small purse or a backpack. Many people ask us if the company's employees check the amount of luggage at boarding time. The answer is that although the size of the luggage is not usually strictly controlled, what is systematically checked is that you do not carry a bag for which you have not paid. If you are caught with a bag that you are not entitled to carry, you will have to pay an amount of money that is probably going to cost you more than the price of the ticket. The fares also have other rules related to cancellations or changes. All companies present them clearly. Again, you have to understand what you are buying. The cheapest fares do not usually include the ability to cancel or change the ticket. Many people come in to ask us if they can change their ticket or even cancel their trip. That can only be known by knowing the rules of the fare you have purchased. All companies provide for some form of compensation in the event of delays. Renfe's policy until not so long ago was very generous, returning money for delays of half an hour or more. You cannot even imagine the amount of money that Renfe has given back to us in the last decade for delays in their trains. But recently that policy changed for the worse to match the policies of the competition. In any case, if your train is late, pay attention because you may be entitled to a refund, which is usually paid for delays longer than 1 hour. We have already suffered countless delays and have always received the compensation provided by the company. With the exception of one absurd case with Irio, we requested compensation for delay on a trip Cecilia and I took together. Same train, seats next to each other. We processed the request for compensation separately as required by the company. In one case, we were paid the compensation established by law. In the other, we were told that the circumstances of the delay did not entitle us to compensation. Unbelievable. Train-to-train connections are becoming increasingly more common. One mistake is to be too optimistic when calculating the time needed to complete such a connection. In the case of relatively small stations, such as Córdoba, a 20-minute connection is quite feasible. But in stations like Atocha in Madrid, we never buy any connection of less than 1 hour, because the journey from the point where you will disembark the train to the point where you will board the next train is not fast at all, and you have to know the station inside out in order not to lose time during the connection. If you have to change stations, as in the case of Atocha and Chamartín in Madrid, do not buy a connection of less than 90 minutes. Be very careful also if you are going to combine the arrival of a plane with the departure of a train, and infinitely more careful if the combination is the other way around. If you are thinking of taking a high-speed train and on the same day a flight, the care has to be greater, because in the first case, if you miss the connection, you would miss a train. In the second case, you would miss a flight, probably international, and the damage would be entirely yours. For train to flight connections in Madrid or Barcelona, we recommend leaving a 4-hour buffer between the scheduled flight time and the train departure. Better to wait than miss the connection. In the reverse case, connecting train with flight in Madrid or Barcelona, we would suggest you to avoid it and try to sleep the night before in the city where your flight departs. If this is not possible, take an early high-speed train early in the morning if your flight departs in the evening of the same day. Every time there's an incident, more and more frequent, that causes long delays in trains, there are many people who miss their flight connections. Don't be one of them. This can be a mistake mainly from a financial point of view. Early and late day journeys can be more expensive to much more expensive than midday journeys, especially on routes such as Seville-Madrid or Barcelona-Madrid. The first and last schedules of the day concentrate many business passengers who travel during the day to work in another city, returning at the end of the day. As demand is higher, so are prices. If the time of travel is not important to you, be sure to compare prices in all time slots of the day. We are not saying that the beginning or the end of the day is always more expensive, but be sure to check other time slots. When boarding a high-speed train, they will not check the liquids you are carrying as they do at airports. But if they discover that you are traveling with a sharp object, be it a knife or even a sword, they will confiscate it. This is especially relevant in the case of cities like Toledo, where knives and swords are a souvenir that many people buy. If you buy a knife as a souvenir in Toledo, ask them to pack it for you so that you can travel with it on the high-speed train. There was a time not so long ago when the main train stations in Spain had left luggage services to make life easier for travelers. Then came the pandemic, forced to close those services, and despite the time elapsed since the return to normality, those services have not been recovered. Don't count on finding a left luggage office at the station. The only exception is Barcelona, where a left luggage office operates in the garage building next to the station, and Córdoba and Zaragoza, where the bus stations next to the train station have lockers. In the rest of the cities, you will have to resort to services outside the station. We have a short video on the channel where we talk about the specific case of Atocha station in Madrid. High-speed tickets are end-to-end. You buy a ticket to go from A to B, which includes a seat reservation for your specific train schedule. You cannot make any alterations to that route. If you get off halfway, you lose the second part of the ticket. If you want to make a stop on the way, going for example from Madrid to Barcelona with a stop in Zaragoza, you will have to buy a Madrid-Zaragoza ticket and a Zaragoza-Barcelona ticket. Rare is the day at Atocha or Sants stations when we don't see desperate people rushing with their tongues hanging out to board the train at the last minute. Some do not make it, and the ensuing frustration is quite saddening. The boarding process on a high-speed train is not similar to that of a conventional or commuter train. In the latter, if you arrive at the station 5 minutes early, you will have no problems boarding. The same does not happen with high-speed trains. If you watch the video in which we explain step by step how is a high-speed trip in Spain, you will understand the reasons. Our advice is that in large stations with a passenger flow that borders on collapse at certain times of the day, such as Atocha in Madrid or Sants in Barcelona, you should plan to arrive at the station at least 1 hour in advance. That's plenty of time, but that caution of minutes will come in handy if there is a mishap on your way to the station. Traffic in the city can be congested, the line to get through the security checkpoint at the station can be endless. Want to get there in less time? Go ahead, the trip is yours. It would be a mistake not to take advantage of free travel with a Combinado Cercanías. The Combinado Cercanías is a benefit that some high-speed train companies offer their customers that allows you to travel for free on commuter trains. We have an entire video dedicated to explaining what it is and how to take advantage of it. Be sure to check it out. It can be useful for getting in or out of an airport, for example. Adif, which is the public company responsible for the high-speed infrastructure in Spain, including both tracks and stations, offers an assistance service for those with mobility problems, whether they are elderly, disabled, or mothers with babies. The service is called Acerca, is free of charge, and must be requested either when purchasing the ticket or when arriving at the station. In the latter case, it is recommended to arrive well in advance. The employees of the service accompany passengers who require it until they are left on board the train. There are special platforms to assist wheelchair users with boarding and disembarking. If you are boarding at an intermediate station, which is not at the beginning of the route, it is worthwhile to find out the location along the platform where your car will stop. This information will be given to you by the company's employees when they check your ticket before you go down to the platform. If they don't tell you, ask them. And this is because there are trains made up of double trains, very long, and if you are not positioned at the approximate point where your car will stop, you may have to run like hell to get to your car before the train departs. Keep in mind that stops at intermediate stations are usually very quick, only a few minutes. Related to the previous point, make sure you get on the correct car. That identification appears on a screen on the outside of the carriage and also on the inside of the carriage. The number of times we have arrived at our seats and they were occupied by someone claiming those seats were theirs. And it is always the same. We ask to see the ticket to find out the person was in the wrong carriage. Let's talk about luggage again. In the Aves, Hablos and Irios, there is a compartment for large suitcases and a quite generous tray above the seats where you can place smaller luggage such as hand luggage, carry-ons. Some people even place larger suitcases in these trays. And despite the announcements made by the train staff, there are many people who place their small suitcases in the place for the big ones. And when you arrive with your big suitcase, there is no space left to place it. Don't be like them. Small suitcase on top of the seat. On Ouigo trains, it's every man for himself. Put your luggage where it will fit, as there isn't enough room for carry-on luggage on the trays above the seats. When it comes to buying high-speed tickets, our recommendation is that you do it either on the company's website or on a specialized website such as Trainline, which is a trusted partner of the channel and which we have been recommended for a long time. You will see the link in the first comment below the video to a video we recorded on the Trainline. On the Trainline, you compare prices of the 4 services on just the one screen, Ave, Hablo, Irio and Ouigo, and you can buy a round-trip ticket with tickets from different companies in just the one purchase. But beware of unknown or not recommended companies. We do not want to mention any, but there are 2 whose name begins with the word rail, where the purchase can end up being quite expensive. In the vast majority of cases, high-speed rail is working wonderfully in Spain, but the growing number of services and passengers is putting a lot of pressure on the system, and incidents are much more common today than they were a few years ago. Hence, our earlier advice on train flight connections. Last year, for example, on more than half of our high-speed journeys, we experienced some kind of incident, sometimes for the most unlikely reasons, as happened to us one night in Atocha in Madrid, when the presence of a suicide on a bridge over the high-speed lines forced the company to cut the power supply in the entire station and vicinity, completely paralyzing train traffic in and out of Madrid, which is the same as paralyzing half of Spain. We spent hours in the station, inside that train with the lights off, while we waited for the problem to be sorted out. Thank goodness we were only going home. If we had had a commitment at the end of the trip, we would have missed it. That's why it is very important that you try to avoid combining train travel with visits to monuments with booked time slots or any other activity whose loss you might be prejudiced by. Always have a backup plan in the case the worst happens. And with this advice we come to the end of our list of mistakes you should avoid making to make your high-speed train travel in Spain perfect. And if you are coming to Spain and want to make the most of its cities, take a look at our collection of self-guided walking tours where we take you around the cities as if you were a local, with the help of detailed instructions, descriptions and online maps. If you have any questions about the topic of the video, take advantage of the commentary box to ask. You will now see on the screen the complete list of videos on the subject of high-speed train travel. Lots of information to make the most of this way of traveling around Spain. We are already waiting for you in those videos.